A good introduction is vital in getting an audience member engaged with a story, whether it's in a film or a show or when somebody cracks open a book. You immediately want that person to feel like they are transported into the world that you have built for them, getting them engaged right away as soon as possible. And there are 3 things that are done within a solid introduction to get somebody engaged within the story. First thing you want to do is intrigue the audience, showing them something that they're going to be interested in. And then you want to inform, providing information on the tone and conflicts that the audience can be prepared to experience. And lastly, you want the audience to be invested in the potential outcome that is going to occur by the time we get to story's end. And when we are experiencing a world that is not entirely like our own, it can be very helpful to utilize a prologue, such as the Lord of the Rings film trilogy did, and now Amazon's brand new show, The Rings of Power, does. And the reason I want to bring up the Lord of the Rings film trilogy here is because I believe that this prologue is done to near perfection. However, I don't think that the Rings of Power's prologue packs nearly as big of a punch as its older brother does. A massive shout out to the VFX team in really transporting us to Middle-earth and giving us some very good visuals in that sequence, but I do think that throughout the prologue, it takes a little bit too long to get that intrigue, information, and investment that we're really looking for pretty quick. And the best way that I can describe the introduction of Rings of Power is it's kind of like Fellowship of the Ring meets Raiders of the Lost Ark. Both of those are great introductions, and the Rings of Power still doesn't really live up to what either one of those films did. Now, I know it's a television series and they have a lot longer time to really get things going and developed, but Rings of Power did premiere as a 2-episode premiere and should have had somewhat of a feature film feel to it. And there's definitely moments throughout the show that have that feeling, but I think that some of the issues where people are struggling with the storytelling start at the very beginning. Now, in my video where I did my first impressions of the Rings of Power series, I mentioned I had some red flags within the introductory sequence, and I wanted to go through and really break down and analyze the prologue of the show and ask the question, was it really necessary? Did the show need to start out this way, and does it really help within its storytelling? So the first thing I'm going to point out when talking about this prologue is the number 4. I believe that it takes about 4 minutes before you really get your money shot and big intrigue into the world of the Rings of Power. And to compare that to some other stories that have phenomenal introductions, right at 4 minutes within the Fellowship of the Ring is when Isildur is cutting off the ring from Sauron's hand. And in the movie The Dark Knight, right at about 5 minutes is when you get the face reveal of the Joker and also finding out that he is the mastermind behind the bank robbery that takes place at the beginning. By the time you get to 4 to 5 minutes in both of those movies, you're intrigued, you're informed, and you're invested, accomplishing all 3 things very quick. Rings of Power, however, is a much slower start. It takes about 4 minutes before we really get any type of big intrigue into the show. They decide to spend a lot of time building up Galadriel, making this boat, illustrating that she was kind of bullied and undermined as a kid, and then she has a conversation with her brother, who is revealed to be a pretty respectable guy, a nice older brother, and you as an audience are beginning to like this guy, so you are being intrigued and somewhat interested within the story, but right at about 4 minutes, you have Finrod walking over the hill, and you see Valinor in all its glories, the trees of Valinor all lit up, it looks beautiful, and immediately just that glimpse of beauty is taken away and you are introduced to the conflict and given some information in the fact that Morgoth was a bad dude. He took the light out of the trees of Valinor and did what bad dudes do. And it's at this point where we see the elves going to Middle-earth. That's how we're getting to the setting of where the show is taking place. We get to see battle sequences, and we see that there are a lot of elven lives that are lost. So at this point, we're intrigued by seeing the lights, the battles, the enemy. We're informed that Morgoth is the bad guy, and they are trying to invest us in the story by seeing that the elves have died and suffered a great loss in this war they had against the servants of Morgoth. But we find out that even though Morgoth was defeated, there is still evil in the world because his servant Sauron is still at large, and Galadriel's brother Finrod took it upon himself to try and hunt down Sauron. And it is here at this moment within the prologue that I think we are given a great disservice. We are told through the dialogue essentially of what happens to Finrod. He is killed by Sauron and given a brand that is this emblem of Sauron and serving as this mysterious symbol that we are going to continue to see pop up throughout the series. So every time you see a symbol or something that looks like this, you're witnessing the work of Sauron. However, the mistake that was made here is that what we are told happened would have been more interesting to see play out on screen. Finrod battling it out with Sauron and ultimately coming up short, and Sauron branding Finrod, I think gives us more investment with the loss of that character, as well as more connection with the evil of Sauron, because up to this point, we didn't even really get any type of close-up shot of the bad guy, just a pretty wide-angle view of Sauron. And while I think the scene looks pretty cool, we still haven't really gotten up close and personal with the evil that this prologue is talking about. But with Finrod being lost, Galadriel finds that it is now her responsibility to continue on and take on this hunt for Sauron upon herself, searching all over Middle-earth, going from the furthest lands to the west, all the way to the east, to the mountains, in the north, to the coldest reaches. We're given this visual that she travels far in order to find Sauron, and they come to a point where they are pretty close. They find a frozen fortress, and we are introduced to what I am calling the Raiders of the Lost Ark inspired part of this introduction. So the elves enter into this creepy fortress, giving us this vibe of fear, and we are given this sense that something mysterious and spooky is going to happen here. Galadriel finds the signs of Sauron, but at the same point, they are attacked by a snow troll, which this action sequence has been kind of joked about a lot on the internet. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I just think the shot of Galadriel flying through the air just doesn't really look very good. I know a lot of people want to make fun of it, but just aesthetically, I don't think it looks great. And we are given this so close moment. We're so close to catching Sauron, but the people who are in Galadriel's company decide that they are going to give up on the search because they're losing people within their company. They've gone further than they were supposed to. They've exceeded the expectation of their orders, and they're ready to retire. Who can really blame them? But it's kind of that moment where it's like, oh, we're so close. We were almost there, but we're going to hit the reset button. And that is essentially where the prologue ends. So essentially the question I have is, did this show need a prologue? And to me, the answer is yes. And one of the reasons why I think that was very important is because this show is called The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. And I think this prologue serves as an information dump in order to basically tell people who aren't familiar with the marketing or anything for this show going in that, hey, yes, Lord of the Rings is on the title, but this is a different story. It's taking place at a different time, in a different era, and I really think that that is the point of this prologue. Yes, it sets up the story and where it's going to go. Was it absolutely necessary to help the story? I don't really think so, right? Because this is a television series that is meant to go on for many seasons. They have the ability to develop the magic in the world at a slower pace because of the nature of television. So that upfront prologue probably isn't quite as necessary. A cold open to an inciting incident might have been more interesting if I'm going to be completely honest, but I do think they just had to get over the obstacle of, hey, this is called The Lord of the Rings, but it's not actually the story of The Lord of the Rings. This is a couple thousand years before that happens. Ultimately, I think that the prologue / introduction of Rings of Power just takes a little bit too long to get going. We have seen openings within film and storytelling that just kind of get the pace up and get us excited very fast. And I feel like there's moments where the stuff that you see on screen is neat and fascinating, and then there's other moments where you're kind of taken out of it. I know a lot of people want to tease on the snow troll scene, but actually the worst part about that opening sequence was the sound effects when Galadriel decides to punch into the ice. I don't know about you guys, but it sounded like a comic book punch to me. And I did immediately start laughing when I heard that. But did the introduction intrigue, inform, and get us invested? It did. It intrigued decently well. It informed decently well. I'm not sure that it got us invested nearly as much, right? Because we have made this connection with Galadriel and we see that everybody's quitting on her when we all know that Sauron is still out and about and we want him to be defeated. But I just feel like it's not as engaging and I'm not as invested after spending those 17 minutes watching that intro. However, those are just my thoughts on the first 17 minutes of the show that I just kind of wanted to talk about more in depth. What did you guys think about that opening sequence? Did it get you engaged in the story? Did it totally take you out of it? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this where I talk about specific sequences from Rings of Power or Lord of the Rings or another fantasy sci-fi related show or movie. I enjoyed doing this and I hope that it was entertaining and educational to you. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you want more, make sure to subscribe and I will talk to you next time on Parallel Quest. Bye-bye.